for cold, hard sports talk with your hosts, Ty Gore, Matt Barrett, and Jake Woods.
All right, everybody. So today with me, we have a special guest. His name is Nolan Kaiser. He played in Camrose Kodiaks for 3 years, made an RBC Cup appearance, played for his country at the World Junior A Challenge, played 4 years at UAF, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and then has spent the last 6 seasons in Huntsville, won a couple championships down there, one time first team Allstar. Nolan, how's it going, buddy?
Good. And hey, thanks for having me. It was pretty cool when you guys messaged me and wanted to join the pod. So yeah, I'm pretty excited.
We're excited to have you, man. It's especially being from Calgary, it's pretty cool to see somebody going down there and having some success in the Southern Pro League. So we'll definitely be covering that.
I want to jump in with one right off the top here. Last week or a couple episodes ago, we had University of Alaska Fairbanks commit Alex Rondeau on. I asked him the question. I'll ask it to you. What exactly is a Nanook? Is it just a polar bear? Is it a kind of polar bear?
It's just a polar bear as far as I know. I mean, yeah, that's as good as I can explain it. It's better than a sea wolf, though. I don't know what the heck that thing is. So,
all righty, I'll hand it off to Gorsey to start the formal interview. Now that I just had to get that one out there at the top.
For sure.
Good question, man. Yeah, so we'll just kick right into it. We'll start off with your junior career. So, like I just mentioned, you're from Calgary, Alberta. Played your minor career there, I'm assuming, and then hopped right into your 16-year-old year with the Camrose Kodiaks, who at the time were 2-time defending champions. So just, do you want to walk us through the process? What led you to Camrose, and were there other suitors at the time?
Yeah. So the year before I went to Camrose, I just played Midget A. So I got cut from AAA. They didn't take any 15-year-olds that year, and then just played in the Midget A league. And then I was drafted actually by Kamloops. So I had been to their camp once before, and then going into juniors, like I had a bunch of teams invited me to main camp, and I ended up just picking Camrose. I had a buddy, Dylan Olson, that I grew up playing with maybe 2-3 years before that. And he was a big influence, and him and his dad on getting me to Camrose. And it was just, at the time, they were one of the best organizations in the country. And honestly, when I was 16, I was planning on playing in the black and white game, and then headed to Kamloops the next day. And I just kind of got a sour taste in my mouth that summer when they invited me to main camp, and they sent a letter to Nolan Kaiser. And I don't know, I just kind of, it didn't really sit great with me. And then when I was in Camrose in camp, I basically just said, I'm either just going to stick around for however long until I get cut and go back and hopefully play it. Well, I would have played AAA. And then just basically whatever happened with Kamloops would happen. I wasn't really too interested at that point. And so after the black and white game, I told Boris Rybalka that I wanted to stay. And then after that, I told my parents that we weren't going to Kamloops. So I ended up being the last guy. So they were making cuts throughout. And my mom was messaging me like, when are you going to be back? Like, school's starting and this and that. And I'm like, well, they actually just had us go to the Camrose High and like signing up for school here. And she was like, what the hell is going on? Like, when are you going to be home? I had no idea. I was dressing in a locker room by myself. Like everyone else was in the locker room, and like the Camrose locker room, and I was in the public locker room for 2 days dressing by myself. Ended up making the team. I honestly would have never thought. Ben Gallagher and I were the 2 16-year-old D-men that made it that year. And we kind of just switched off. I think we had both played maybe like 35, 40 games apiece. So yeah, that was that was definitely an eye opener for me. I'd never lived away from home and could barely wipe my own ass. Like, I didn't know how to do laundry. I didn't know how to cook. Like, that my first year, basically, I lived off Michelina's TV dinners. I would just heat up 2 of those before a game, and that's what I would have. And it's pretty embarrassing, but I really didn't learn how to cook until probably college, maybe tail end of college when my roommates taught me there. So I was, yeah, I learned a lot for sure in that time.
And just adding on to that, so you were playing Midget A the year before, and you walk into this Camrose Kodiak's team, and this was not a team full of small boys. You had Jeremy Bearns, Andrew McWilliam, and Cam Dion, all top 10 in the league in PIMS. Can you just walk us through what that was like as a 16-year-old, seeing those guys go to battle every day?
I felt like a boy, honestly. Like, these guys with chest hair in the locker room, and I'm 16 years old, and it was definitely eye opening. And there was a lot of really tough guys in the league that year. I think Bernsey led the league, and I played with him in Huntsville here as well, but he had probably close to 30 or 40 fights that year. And we had guys like Andrew McWilliam, who was an absolute horse, and Cam Dion, like, yeah, he was undersized but tough as nails. And like Wyatt Hamilton, even, he broke his jaw that year, but he actually got in a fight with a broken jaw. Just even guys like Kyle Miller, David Jacobson, like, just all so tough. And it was good to be on a team like that. I think I only got in one fight that year. It was in a line brawl. It was actually pretty fun, but yeah, that was definitely eye opening, especially with Bernsey fighting so much, and basically every game someone wanting to go him, and it was just totally different from Midget A.
Yeah, no kidding, eh? So moving on.
Maybe sorry, Grizz. Like, maybe walk us, like, your only fight and probably your first fight is a line brawl.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through what the heck happened.
I can't even remember how deep it was into the season. My parents were there, and I had never been in a hockey fight before. I'd kind of like jostle around with guys after practice and stuff, but so what ended up happening was there was a guy that got hit from behind on Olds, and basically, or one of our guys got hit from behind, and like 2 of us jumped on the guy. And I remember, like, basically guys were like, I got him, and I like got up, and everyone else was grabbed. So then this I had like the last guy was a D-man, and he was a 20-year-old, and came down and grabbed me, and like we fought, and honestly, it was just kind of a short fight. We both went down. I had a big goose egg on my head, and that was I popped the cherry, and it was probably the best thing that could have happened. Is just heat of the moment, line brawl. It was cool. And with my parents being there too, my mom was pretty worried and all that, but no, it was good.
That's awesome, man. So moving on to your second year, junior A, you had a big jump going from 6 points to nearly a point a game. Besides just becoming a year older and maybe feeling a little more comfortable in the AJ, was there something big that changed there?
I mean, yeah, obviously being second year, that summer I put a little more time into training and stuff. Before that, I'd never really done much. I'd kind of just do the basics, and I always got by on just using my skill. And I was a taller kid, and I would just kind of, use my size and skill, and that was it. So I did a bit of training that summer with Daryl and Dylan Olson. I went down to Utah and trained with them for a bit, and then I just did some stuff back home. And Daryl was always my power skating coach, and that year, I don't know what it was. It just, everything clicked, and I was on the power play, and it was a good season for me. That was the year that I ended up committing to Alaska. So that was pretty exciting as well.
What's the process in, like, committing for something like that? How was that process for you? I know it's different for a lot of guys, but as a 17-year-old being so young, and, you probably have like an extra year or so before you go there. What was the process like?
I would get calls, and teams would kind of wait outside the locker room for me and stuff. And it was totally different. I had never experienced anything like that before. I just basically, you talk to them and they'd give you their card and that was it. Like they said, oh, we'll call you, we'll be watching and this and that. But you never really, I never really knew until it came down to when I decided. I ended up flying up to Alaska. It wasn't probably my original choice. I mean, Alaska is just not somewhere that I want to go and live. It just sounded so cold and so miserable. And some of the other teams I talked to, I know St. Cloud was one of the ones that was probably the most interested. And they kind of were putting together an offer like 75% or 85% or something like that. And Alaska from the start was full ride. So I ended up going to a visit there, and they showed me the campus and the guys, and got to meet the guys. And my decision was pretty easy. I mean, there was a lot of guys from Alberta and BC that I knew and I played against. And if I went down south somewhere, I'd be one of the only Canadian guys. And I kind of made the decision on my own. And I had like when I got back from Alaska, the head coach called me, said, you have 3 days to decide. And I called him, I think the next day, and said, I'll come. And then I called my parents and told them that I'm going to Alaska. So, I mean, ultimately the full ride was the main reason I chose there. Obviously school's pretty expensive, so I would take what I could get, and Alaska ended up being pretty sweet. So.
And so quickly going back to the junior A. So your final year, that Kodiak's team made a deep run, going all the way to the finals, playing in the RBC Cup. Actually, do you want to just go right into the RBC Cup and tell our listeners what that tournament's like?
Yeah, well, we hosted it that year. So normally the route would be you win the AJ and then you play in the Doyle against the BC team. So we were down 3-1 in the quarters to Okotoks, came back and won in game 7, went down 3-1 to Brooks, came back and won in game 7. And then we went and played Spruce, and Spruce was a really good team. And they ended up beating us. So they went to the Doyle, and I think they lost out to Vernon maybe. And so Vernon was the team that came to Camrose, and we basically, after we lost, we had like a week off or something like that, and then went right back to practice, and we were gonna be the hosts of the tournament. So I actually only played like a game and a period or something like that. I ended up getting concussed, and so I missed the rest of the tournament. But it was really intense, and there were some really good teams there. I thought we probably had a good chance of winning, obviously, but I mean, they're the best teams in Canada, so it was we just fell short. And I think Pembroke ended up winning that year, if I recall. Yeah, I think Vernon was the powerhouse, and Pembroke was kind of like almost an underdog, but they were a great team and really well rounded. So that was my RBC experience. I remember getting back into the locker room after I got hit and not remembering the banners up on the wall and like the patches on my shoulders and stuff. So it was a pretty bad one. Took me a while to recover from that, but yeah.
No kidding. And also that same year, you got selected along with your teammate, Ben Gallagher, to play for the Canada West team at the World Junior A Challenge. What was that like? Where was the tournament hosted? And just overall, what was your experience there?
Yeah, so I got invited to go to tryouts, and I had I didn't have any thought of making the team or anything like that. Had a good camp and got back, and I ended up getting a healthy scratch the one game. My parents were there, and I was kind of Boris called me into the office, and I was kind of wondering what was going on, and he said, yeah, we're just gonna have you sit tonight, but I wanted to let you know that you'd made Team Canada West. And so that was really sweet. So it actually myself, Ben Gallagher, Craig Bokenfor, and Sam Jardine. So we had 4D from Camrose all go to the Team Canada West. Yeah, it was in Penticton, so it was a pretty good spot. And we ended up, we didn't end up doing very well, but it was a really cool experience, playing against some some guys. I didn't end up actually realizing until last year that Nikita Kucherov was on the Russian team. So that was pretty cool to find out. I just remember thinking like, who ripped that tournament up? And I just went back and looked, and of course Nikita Kucherov was at the top of the list. So that was pretty sweet.
What, like, did you got to play against that Russian team, or were you guys in separate pools, or did you get to play against them?
Yeah, we ended up playing against them. Obviously, I had no idea who any of them were. Like some of the guys from Eastern Canada on the East team, like Pekka, and I can't even remember who else they had, but Pekka was definitely the standout. And then, yeah, there was Sweden that we played against. I think we were in a pool of Sweden, Russia, and I can't remember who else, but yeah, we ended up playing Russia and Sweden. Yeah, and just didn't cut it.
What was Kucherov like? Was he like, as like those, he's got sweet hands. We all know like his hands, like how hard was he to defend?
I didn't know who any of these guys were. And I don't remember any of them like really. I couldn't recall like who exactly he was, because I didn't know who they were. Right. So,
oh yeah.
And then looking back, and it was just like Nikita Kucherov, and you're like, can't be the same person. You click the name, and of course Tampa Bay Lightning. So that was cool to see. I had no idea who he was.
And actually, that serves as a perfect segue. Let's jump right up to your second year at Alaska Fairbanks, and you got to join forces with another future Stanley Cup champion in Colton Parayko. What's that guy like in practice?
So yeah, when he got to Alaska, he must have been like 6'4", maybe 200 pounds. Like he was like just huge. Like he was like a giraffe, kind of like really tall, lanky, skinny. And over his time there, he basically just became a man. And like now he's like 6'6", 230. And obviously he was probably the best athlete on our team. He could dunk. He had the biggest vert, the fastest skater, hardest shot. So, but practicing with him every day, you kind of get used to him. And when you play against other teams, I remember my buddy and I were talking like, who's the best defenseman in our league? And we're thinking about all these different guys on different teams, because the defensive player of the year was going to come out. And when it got announced, we were just like, how didn't we think of him? Like, I think you just kind of pass over a guy that you play with and practice with every day, because you see more of his faults than all the stuff he does well. Just with how much you do in practice. And obviously when he turned it on in games, he was incredible. So it's no surprise to see how he's doing in the NHL right now too.
Well, obviously with a guy like Parayko, who's, a future NHLer, the boys can, and you said, best natural athlete on the team. Was there anyone else on that team who you feel really took a leadership role for you and really helped you grow as a player?
Yeah, I was really tight with like Cody Kunik and Colton Beck, Nick Yaremchuk, and some of those guys. They're all AJBC guys. Yeah, I mean, I came in with a pretty good class. Not really many big names, but they were all just great guys. And of course, we still talk to this day. And but yeah, I mean, I was really young with my first year. Like when I was a freshman, I was maybe 19 years old, and there was guys on the team that were 25. So obviously there's a pretty big age gap there, and all the seniors were older guys. And I mean, we had our fun, and we got to know each other really well and stuff. But I kind of more got in line with the guys that were sophomores and juniors too. So yeah. So when Colton came in, he wasn't real. I mean, he was a 3rd round draft pick, kind of developmental guy. And then once he started filling in, he became obviously a great defenseman. But leaders for sure, like Cody Kunik, Tyler Morley, Colton Beck, they were our best players. And of course, Cooney at the end of his senior year went and played a game for Tampa against the Caps. That was really cool seeing him on TV. And then Becker plays in the A now with Iowa, and Morley was overseas in Finland, and now he's in Sweden. So still all playing really good players. And yeah, I still keep in touch with them too.
What's a game day at Fairbanks? Like, what's the atmosphere like playing in that place and just like the town in general?
Yeah, so during the winter, it's actually really crazy. It gets down to be like 4 hours of sunlight, and like the horizon, basically the sun just barely goes over the horizon like this. It doesn't like go up and over like that. It just kind of stays low. And there'd be days when we go to the rink at 10:30 for practice, and the sun would kind of just be starting to come up, and we'd have practice, workout, and then kind of off to class. And you'd maybe get like 1 hour of sunlight if the sun came up at like 11 to 2 or something like that. So it was really wild. But normal game day, like we would go to this place called the Pump House to eat, and they had meal for us, and we'd go to the Carlson Center in the morning, and we'd do our pregame skate, and they would announce the lineup, and then we would go and eat, and then we'd go back, and guys would go take their naps, get ready for games and stuff. And then for me, like I missed a lot of games, so I would kind of wait around and then get a ride to the rink with one of the guys after, and then we'd go watch. And for a long time, this guy Justin Tateson and I would commentate games because we had missed so many games. Like we were just sitting up there and commentating and color broadcasting. So we made it as good as it could be when we'd sit out. But Alaska, I mean, really cold. Like I don't know if you guys have ever seen when it gets to be like -30 or -40, that's Fahrenheit too. So there's no wind chill in Fairbanks either. It's inland. So basically if you took a cup of coffee outside and threw it up, and it would just turn into dust. You could look it up on YouTube after, but it's really wild. And that's how cold it was. And you get climatized and stuff, but balancing school and being on the road and going and playing hockey. I mean, we had a bunch of business guys. There's a couple engineers that was a bit more difficult for them to do class and stuff, but for business, like we'd all help each other out, and the teachers were pretty understanding. We would take 2 classes online so that we could do school, and then if we were on the road, we'd be able to do the online classes as well. So it took a while to get used to juggling all that and making sure you had to be above a certain GPA to be able to play, and also keep up at the rink too. So there was a lot going on.
And just a quick question regarding like rivalries. So especially once in your third year, Anchorage got moved into your conference. Is there some sort of rivalry between Fairbanks and Anchorage that we should know about? Is that pretty intense?
I mean, absolutely. So we would play 2 out of conference games, I'm pretty sure, when we were in the CCHA. So we'd play 2 out of conference games, and that would be for the Governor's Cup. So every year it was really intense, and the teams before us, they had a streak going, and I ended up winning all 4 Governor's Cups when I was in Alaska Fairbanks, which was unreal. And I remember the last one when I was a senior, went to a shootout, and my roommate Sean Cahill made the save, and we all jumped on him. And after the game, and that's how much it meant to us. And obviously, the Gov Cup, like that was our biggest night of the year, when we'd usually play 1 at home and 1 on the road. So it was really intense, and probably the most fun that you could have playing college hockey in Alaska.
It's all a fun rivalry. Hey, does it get nasty at times?
I mean, yeah, it does, like as much as it can be in college. There's no fighting, obviously, right. So you can't really end up doing that. But yeah, I mean, as nasty and like as much will you want to win to the Governor's Cup, and especially for the Nanoks, just want to keep it there, right? We still got the cup, and I think it was something like 8 or 10 years in a row that Alaska had won it. So wow. It's a bit of a tradition going on there.
So now moving on to your pro career. So you've spent your 4 years at Fairbanks, and you've played in Calgary, Camrose, and now Fairbanks, Alaska. And then all of a sudden you sign in Huntsville, Alabama. Needless to say, quite a change both in climate as well as kind of hockey popularity. So
Mhm.
what led you to Huntsville, and was there anybody else calling at the time that you chose over them, or?
So at the end of our college career, I mentioned him earlier. Tateson ended up going. We visited Huntsville. We were a 2-game road trip here my senior year, and remember I had a bunch of family come down, and because I'm thinking we'll never be in Alabama ever again, right? So I had like my parents, my sister, my uncle, my cousin, and a bunch of friends and stuff, and so when we were here, the Havoc would practice before us, and I remember their coach, obviously Glenn, coming out and saying they were, I think, the worst team in the league that year. And they said, if any of you guys seniors want to come down after the year, just let me know. And I think Tater played a handful of games his senior year. And after that, he came down, did really well. And then he was signed on for the next year. So Glenn talked to me that summer, and I signed a PTO. That's just basically the normal contract that you sign. And then once you make the team, you sign a standard contract, but everyone gets a PTO. I went to Canmore Eagles camp. Jordy Quaz, he played for Olds. He got me there. I met him at the All-Star game when I was 17, and I talked to him, and he's a great guy. He ended up getting me to be able to go to Colorado. And I kind of picked them over Kalamazoo. I know Glenn knows the coach at Kalamazoo. I'm not sure if that had any thing to do with it, but ended up going to Colorado, and I thought I had a pretty good camp, and realistically thought I could maybe make the team, but they had a bunch of returning guys, and like it was, I mean, everyone's big and strong, guys that are drafted and in the system and stuff. So I ended up getting released, and then I went down to Huntsville and played the full season there. And then, the rest is history. I can't believe it's my 6th year here.
So moving on to your second year, now you've spent a year in Alabama, and the Havoc have a great year, lead the league in scoring. You performed at nearly a point a game, and this is what was your first all-star team selection. What was that season like for you?
Yeah, we had really high octane team. And my second year, we had a bunch of guys come in from NATE, the Northern Institute of Technology there. And we had a really good team. And I thought that, honestly, that was probably one of our best Havoc teams that we ever had. And we just kind of ran out of gas once the playoffs came. We kind of barely stumbled into playoffs, and then just ended up losing it. But that second year was good. I mean, again, kind of getting to know the league a little bit, and kind of establish myself my first year. I probably had more penalty minutes than I needed to, but I think it helped, and guys kind of knew who I was. At least it wasn't just a guy that they could pick on. They maybe have to second guess, and that allows more room on the ice for you and allow you to make more plays and stuff. But of course, there's always guys like, I don't know if you know much about the league, but like Denny Sicard and like guys like that you have to play against. And like these guys have like career, like 2,500 PIMs in the league. Like the league was, my first year especially, was really tough. Like I had Bernsey on my team, and he had 30 fights exactly that year, I'm pretty sure. And there was guys like, it was crazy. Every team had a couple tough guys. And my second year, some of those guys kind of faded out. But there was the guys like Brad Drobot. He played for the Mustangs. He was always a heavyweight in our league, and him and Bernsey would always go at it. And then like Tyler Barr was in the AJ as well, and he was psycho. You always had to watch out for him. But it seemed like every team had a guy that you just always had to make sure to watch out for. And for me, I just kind of got an opportunity to play on the power play almost from the time that I got to Huntsville. Basically, there was one guy that returned, and it was Stuart Steffen, and I got paired up with him, and he ended up having his jersey retired. And here in Huntsville, he's an incredible defenseman, good leader, and he kind of took me under his wing and showed me the ropes for how to play D in pro hockey. So that was my second year, and yeah, him and I did really well. It helped playing with him too, because he was a big time point producer. So that was good.
Yeah, I know we just talked to another SPHL athlete who's been in the league about as long as he, maybe a year or two more. He's been about 8 years. Peter DeSalvo.
Yeah.
And he was saying when he was first getting into the league, it was every other game line brawls.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to think if there's 56 games in a year and you're fighting 30 times, like there'd be times in warmups when guys would be standing face to face, like, I'm going to kill you tonight. And like, I remember one of my very first games as a rookie, I got in a fight with this guy, Brad Plumpton, and he was like one of the guys that was he was big and like a lot older than me and probably a lot stronger than me. Him and I ended up getting into it at one of my first games of my Havoc career. And we ended up fighting, and then we went down, and I don't know why I held on to him and kind of gave him a last shot when we were down on the ground, and went back to the locker room. And I remember my roommate, Kyle McNeil, he played in the league for a long time. He's like, what are you doing? He's like, you're going to be suspended for, I don't know how many games and stuff. And I was thinking, oh God, great. I didn't end up getting suspended. I remember the next night in warmups, like Plumpton and like, they had like Strukoff and Brad Drobot and all these guys. And they're like Kaiser, you're going tonight. And I was just like, oh God, like I was just trying to avoid them. And I mean, that's how the league was. Like, guys, there were some scary guys in the league, and just kind of sometimes had to mind your own business and know who was out there. You couldn't be dumbed into fighting a guy that had like 20 fights or something like that, because you just get your ass beat.
Did the scheduling play any factor in like deciding whether or not to fight? Because I know a couple of times you guys play like 3 games in 3 nights. So if you're in night 1, was ever like, maybe not today, I'll save it for a little later in the series?
There was honestly some guys that would only fight at home my first couple of years. Like, if you went on the road and like guys would ask them to fight, they'd be like, no, I'm not fighting. And like, or like, give me like $20 and I'll fight you or something like that. But there were some guys that just wouldn't fight on the road. It just wasn't worth it. They'd rather fight in front of their home team. But no, 3 and 3s are tough, because you're usually on the road with like sleeper bus and traveling overnight. And on that third night, it's like you're hoping that you're playing another team that's not a 3 and 3, because you're gassed. And I mean, you're basically just trying to fight through what's going to be that night. So for me, I never went out looking for fights, or like before the game, I had a guy like nabbed, like, I'm going to fight this guy. It always just kind of happens in the game, whether it's like a hit or if someone like makes a dirty play on my teammate, I'll stand up for them and stuff. So yeah, never really went out looking for it. And if it happened, it happened.
So just briefly before we move on, that same year, you also got a little bit of a cup of coffee in the ECHL with Adroniak. What's that process like, getting loaned up for a few games, if you want to break that down?
Yeah. So basically they just give you a call and ask you if you're interested in coming up. And so when I talked to Adirondack, they had, I think at the time they said they had 4 D-men, and I was going to be the 5th and come up and be ready to play the rest of the year. And I thought that was my opportunity to make something happen. So I packed my stuff and went up there, and I got there, and there was 7 D and 3 guys that were normally playing on the IR that were coming back after Christmas. So I played 3 games. My first game was a 10 o'clock game in Brampton, and I got up there and they didn't have the sticks that I used, like just a normal 100 flex Sakic. I ended up having to use the 85 flex Drury curve for my first ECHL game. And like, I'd never used the stick before until warmups, and just totally different. The shot was like, I went from a 100 flex to an 85, and it was like, my shot was totally different, and I had to get used to it. I remember making a pass that first game, and like, it was like hip high, like just an absolute grenade down the ice for icing. And I remember getting back to the bench, and I'm like, sorry, I've never used this stick before. And I know it's a lame excuse, but it was just something that I had to get used to. And that was my first ECHL game. But yeah, basically the process was just they call you and then you get there. I thought I was going to be the 5th D-man, and I ended up being like, I played my 3 games, but it was Christmas, and then there was going to be guys coming back, and I just asked to be sent back, and they understood. So went back to Huntsville and finished the year.
So moving on to your 3rd year, and this is a topic I was really excited to talk about because the SPHL's new playoff format is unlike any other pro league I've ever seen. And for listeners who don't know how it works, the top 3 seeds in the league all get to pick their first round opponent. So one doesn't necessarily have to play 8, and essentially the 4 seeds left of the rest. As a player, what kind of impact does that have on the way you guys look at your season? Does that add any sort of pressure, anything like that?
Also,
So
who
they,
who went into making that decision? Was it purely just like a coach's call? Was it a team vote who you wanted to play?
No, I mean, like, it's completely the coach making the call. Like, I mean, they're obviously, like, you kind of get a sense as a coach and a player of who, like, you'd want to prefer to play. But so that was only my 3rd and 4th year that they did that. So I remember when playoffs came around, Peoria ended up picking, well, I can't remember now, but I know what actually that was just last year. So I think it ended up just going, we ended up getting paired up with Mississippi my first year. And I know we should have got paired up with Knoxville, and Knoxville beat us up all year. And they have a really small barn, and they were really good in there. And we ended up getting paired with Macon first round, Mississippi. We lost game 1, and it's a 3-game series, of course, too. So we lost game 1, won game 2, and then went home and we lost game 1 on the road. We didn't have home ice advantage for our first game, and then the next 2 games were at home, so we ended up winning those 2. And then we ended up going up against Macon the next year, and they were high powered, and we lost like 8-2 in game 1 in Huntsville. And then we went to Macon, and I remember there was guys like trying to get into the ice bath after the game, and they're walking by and like, this is going to be a cakewalk. We're going to play Peoria in the finals. And we ended up beating Macon like pretty heavily the second game. And then we won an OT to go to the finals in Macon. That was incredible. Probably one of my favorite memories. But yeah, then we faced off with Peoria, and Peoria was the big bad team that obviously runs away with the regular season every year, and ended up getting the job done that year. It was really fun. That was a really cool experience to win my first championship there.
And there's one game in particular I wanted to point out. Unfortunately, the SPHL isn't great at keeping your stats. It's hard to find moments like this, but there was one game 1 in those finals. You were down 4-1 and stormed back to win 6-5. What was that game like as a player?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure the 2 final teams can choose between 3 or 5 game series. And I think one of their guys like had to go to a wedding basically right after the year. So it ended up being a 3-game series. So we were down 4-1, and I mean, Peoria is a really tough place to play, and they're very structured, very good team. And I think we just ended up getting 1, 2, and then 3, and all of a sudden the game was tied, and we had all the momentum. Like, they play a very defensive style where they really collapse in the D zone. So once we got the puck there, like, we were very comfortable getting pressure, and they kind of just collapsed and ended up just kind of almost folding and giving us the game for game 1. And then game 2, like, guys were absolutely fired up to win at home, and maybe a little bit too amped up. I think we ended up losing 2-1, and we had tons of chances at the end of the game. Again, they just barely held on. And in the next, we had one day, and then we played the next game in Peoria, and yeah, we won 3-1 with an empty netter, and yeah, that was awesome. There's still silly string on the roof in the way locker room in Peoria, so every time we went back there, especially last year, you look up and the roof is just all champagne and beer and silly string. It was pretty cool.
Well, take us kind of like, you know, what the party's like after winning a title like that in that league. I know, you know, those guys, like, these are guys who have, you know, battled their way through hockey careers. What's the party like after that?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, like, obviously we had to bus home, but that night we ended up going to a bar and we were the only people in there. And our owner, Keith, he fronted the tab, and like, it was unbelievable. Like, playing our own music and guys are standing on the bar drinking whatever and partying with the cup, singing "We Are the Champions" and stuff. Like, there was a lot of guys, like I mentioned earlier, Stu, and Andy Williger. He played in the AJ, and a couple other guys, like older guys, Justin Fox and Keegan Asmunson and guys like that. It was all their first championships and their last kind of kick at the can. So when we ended up winning, it was just like, we went for probably 2 weeks straight. We went like all around town, taking the cup everywhere. We went to Nashville. I think it was ended up being 2 weeks after we had won. Like, normally everybody's gone within like a couple days of the season being over. And it was like 2 weeks after the season that we were in Nashville partying, and it was unbelievable. And yeah, some great memories from that run and that bender. I think my girlfriend ended up getting a little fed up with all the drinking and partying, but we just couldn't stop. It was too much fun.
Just some Ovechkin level championship celebrations.
It was, honestly. And I mean, there was guys like that were retiring, so it was their last hoorah, and we ended up getting it done. And yeah, we partied as much as we could.
Well, what's the support like in a town like Huntsville, where it's kind of like, it's you guys, it's the college there. There's probably not a ton of other hockey there that, you know, is this big. So like, what's the support like in the atmosphere in Huntsville?
Yeah, I mean, we're the only pro team in town. They used to have a baseball team and they folded. I know they have a new one now, but because of COVID, they weren't able to start. But I mean, they reset the attendance record 3 years in a row. League records that they broke their own record, and like the VBC holds, I think, 6,000, and on average I think we were getting like 4,500. There'd be nights where it was completely sold out, and it's incredible, like playing in front of that many fans. And like, a lot of people, like, I know they kind of look down on the SPHL, but there's a lot of really good players and the league has evolved really well. And I mean, there's some places like Knoxville gets really rowdy, and Birmingham now gets really rowdy. Like, there's some really tough places to play. But yeah, Huntsville, I think they probably set the standard for attendance and in game and just the way that they organize and run themselves. So, I mean, it's been a privilege to play here for this long.
And going on to the following season now, your team just ran through the year, finishes a 3 seed, led the league in scoring again, ended up going back to back. Your goalie ends up winning playoff MVP. Can you just run through what that season was like, especially walking in with a ring already on your finger?
Yeah. We had another good team and really great goaltending. That was the last year that they did the draft, or whatever you want to call it, for the playoffs. So that was the year, sorry, I was trying to tell you earlier, but that was the year that Peoria finished 1, and they ended up taking 7 or 6, who was Roanoke. And Roanoke ended up sweeping them in the first round. We ended up going to Knoxville. It was just like 3 versus 6 or whatever. Glenn is pretty standard. He wasn't going to go off the board and do like 3 versus 4 or whatever, or 3 versus 5. He went 3 versus 6. We ended up sweeping them. I had an OT goal there to send us to the next round, which is really cool, in Knoxville there. So basically we got paired up with we went Pensacola, and that was really tough. And then we got paired up with Knoxville, and then we went to the finals, and we were playing Birmingham in the finals. And like it couldn't have been a better setup. Like we knew them in and out. Everyone probably thought it was going to be Peoria in the finals, and they got swept by Roanoke, and it ended up being Birmingham, and they had a really high octane team. And basically you just have to make sure that you keep them in front of you. They want to run and gun, and you can't turn it into a horse race. You just got to kind of wait them out and grind them down. And we were able to do that, and went back to back. And I mean, again, it was unbelievable winning a championship, especially at home too. Got one on the road and got one at home, and it was totally different. On the road, my first year when we won, like it was just us in the locker room and just the staff. But then like when you went on at home, there was people in there, like so many news reporters and like all the people that help and like all the docs, and it was just a bit overwhelming. But I mean, it was still really cool to like share that experience with, like at the time my girlfriend was in the locker room, and like there was some family and stuff there, and it was really awesome. So of course the fans like to see it as well. But yeah, that was really good. We had a tough time getting through the first round against Pensacola. They were big and strong, and they had some really good players up front, and yeah, we just ended up getting it through. And then the rest was, I think we won four straight after that. So that was good.
And going on to, I guess it would have been 2019, 2020, you guys are walking in 2-time defending champions, and COVID prevents you from being able to defend your title. Can you talk to us about what that was like, watching your season end like that? Where were you guys as a team, and how did that whole event go down?
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, we had a good team again, and it was just starting to get down to crunch time. 10 games left. It's kind of when things get really ramped up for playoffs, and you get your team going, and you're kind of running on all cylinders. And all of a sudden we're at the game day before a game, and we get called in the locker room, and they basically told us like, hey, the games this weekend are canceled, and we're not sure what's going to happen yet, but this basically COVID-19 is becoming a big thing, and everything's shutting down. And we're kind of like, okay, sure. And then it was not even probably a day or two later that the season just got straight up canceled, and guys were racing home to Canada before the borders closed. And yeah, I mean, it was unfortunate because we had a really good team again. And I mean, every year you have a chance to win three game series, and if you get good goaltending, which we have, and Milosik, like you mentioned earlier, playoff MVP, like you can rely on a guy like that. But if you get the scoring and just get hot at the right time, I mean, anything can happen. So, but yeah, it was really unfortunate, like just to end a season like that. And it just meant nothing. Like we had 10 games left, and there's no champion, there's no nothing. It's just a season that got ended by a outbreak, which is really unfortunate.
I just have one last question. I'll pass it on to Maddie B and Woodsy if they got anything else. So for a lot of our listeners who probably don't know a whole lot about the SPHL, what would you say is the one thing that should draw fans to the league, and maybe pay the $15-$20 to go buy a hockey TV subscription to watch you guys play?
My first couple years, it was definitely fighting. Like that was why people went to the games. Like, not gonna lie, they wanted to see blood, and they wanted to see like people get their face beat in. The league has definitely evolved, and there's a lot of good players that come in and out. And I would say the reason why would just be, I mean, it's not very expensive, obviously, to go watch a game at $15-$20, but the experience, like especially in Huntsville, they put on a good show during the game. And yeah, I mean, I could probably say the same for other places like Knoxville, and there's always giveaways and jerseys and this and that. And I mean, it's high-end hockey too, like especially with rivals. And so yeah, that's how I would explain. There's guys from D1, there's guys from the coast, there's guys from D3 that lit it up, that maybe they're in their first year pro and they're going to go to the coast the next year or whatever. But there's a lot of good guys that roll through this league.
It's also a league where there's often a lot of turnover in teams. Teams are looking very different year to year. You've played your entire career in Huntsville. What's really kept you there and made that your home?
I guess Glenn, he's kept me here, fortunately. But like, I couldn't imagine playing anywhere else, honestly. And like, I've known guys that played here and played there, and it's good, but it's just not as good kind of thing. Yeah, Huntsville, I mean, since I've been here, the year before was the worst season, I think, in SPHL history. And we just kind of had a good core that ended up turning it around. And I think it's more so like the off ice stuff where the guys get so tight here and form a bond and family that is the reason why some of the turnover here hasn't been so big, where we've had 10, 12 guys come back where other teams are bringing back like 3 guys. I think it's just the core group of guys that we have here that kind of really makes it more of a, I don't know, kind of a place where you want to keep going back and you don't want it to end kind of thing. So that's how I'd explain why I've been here. And yeah.
Is there a favorite away barn you love going to? You kind of mentioned some great places that, you know, have great fans and stuff. Is there a favorite away barn where like the atmosphere is just crazy, or you just always have great games there, or anything like that?
So when Birmingham wasn't in the league, our rival was Knoxville, and they always had a really good team, and their rink is really tiny. Like, it's like when you cross the blue line, you feel like you're at like the top of the circles in a normal rink, and it's just, everything's compact, and it's a shooter's rink, and you got to be able to move the puck quick, and guys are on top of you always. So yeah, playing there, their crowd is really rowdy and really fun. But recently I've really enjoyed playing in Birmingham. They have a pretty cool rink there too, and their fans are really rowdy, and they've become our rival. And I've had some success in Birmingham, so I like playing there as well. Their boards are rock solid though, so it's kind of sucks to get hit there, but yeah, try and lay more body than take more body. So
I'll throw
I'd say
one
those
in
two
on
places. So go ahead.
We've heard some stories before about the fans of Louisiana when they were in the league. Do you have any memories of them getting particularly rowdy at games?
My first year was the only year that I played against Louisiana, and they had like a guy, Jake Hosworth, that played in the AHL, and it was crazy that we dressed in the Raging Cajun locker room, and it was not a hockey locker room. It was a basketball locker room. Like, all the stalls were really tall, and it was only made for like, I don't know, 15 people, and there's close to 20 guys getting dressed. Right. So it was a little bit different, and their ice was horrible. And but the only thing I can remember really from there was, I think they threw like rats on the ice, like those like toy rats or something like that, or get like little gators or something like that. I can't remember. We only played there a couple times, but my most vivid memory from there was a dump in that went over the glass, a slap shot, and it hit some person in the head. And it was crazy. We had stopped the game for a while, and yeah, that's unfortunately my most vivid memory of playing in Louisiana, someone getting hit in the head with a slap shot. Fayetteville, my first year was crazy. I remember their home opener. We played against them, and you kind of have a like time where you got to go out there, and we ended up sitting on the bench for probably like 25 minutes, and they had a fire truck, they had a race car, they had like all this different stuff on the ice. And like it was like just totally blown out of proportion to have a fire truck and a race car out on the ice. And I remember the race car ended up the exhaust ended up burning a hole in the ice, so they had to get the fire extinguisher out there, and it was crazy. So Fayetteville, I would say it's a big rink and they don't fill it great, but my favorite ones for sure, Knoxville and Birmingham, I would say.
Well, we've kept you here for nearly an hour, so I think we'll cut it here. Really want to thank you for coming on. You were a great interview and a great inside source as to what's going on in the SPHL.
Sweet. Yeah, absolutely. Of course, a different year this year and regulations and everything like that, but we're making it work. And yeah, I'm glad the league could stay afloat and there's teams to play. So there wasn't any chance that I was going to miss it. Appreciate you guys calling and getting me on here. And yeah, I'm excited to watch and listen and see what the reaction's like.
Is there anything you want to plug? Any side businesses, any social media where people can follow you?
No side business. But yeah, on Instagram and Twitter at Kaisbird. Follow me there if you want. Nothing too spectacular, but I'm on there. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and follow. But again, really appreciate you guys, and I'm excited to see where you guys can get going, especially with just firing it up recently and getting some guys from the league and all that on here. So best of luck to you guys too.
Thank you.